Here's my full book review of The Three-Body Problem.
Oh, hi, Mark.
What's up, Freccero fam? Welcome back to my channel where I like to experience everything that life has to offer. I know, a bit of a different video than normal. Typically, I do post a lot of vlogs and experiences and that kind of stuff, but I have gotten back into reading. Like last year, I did post a video about Darren Brown's new book and the Salad book series, and recently I saw the Netflix TV show Three-Body Problem. And I gotta say, I loved the TV show, and I will talk about it a little bit later in this video, especially with the show compared to the book. And so I figured, hey, why not pick up the actual book that the show is based off of and do a video about it. One thing I want to say before I get to the actual book review itself is this. There's gonna be no spoilers in this video. I try to film and make my book review videos in such a way that if you've not read the book yet, I'm not going to give anything away, and you don't really have to worry about that. On the other end, if you've already read the book, you may be curious about what I have to say about it and my overall thoughts and perspectives on the book. With that being said, let's get into it. So this is my full book review of The Three-Body Problem. It is the first book in the trilogy Remembrance of Earth's Past. And I gotta say, I love this book. The main synopsis of it, to word it super simply, is a unique science fiction book or a sci-fi book blending psychology, philosophy, physics, and theory as to what would happen if we encountered or talked to or found out that we're not alone in the universe. What would happen if we talked to and interacted with an alien civilization? That is the main premise for the entire trilogy, and of course the main start to the trilogy, which is The Three-Body Problem. And I really love this book in particular because I love science fiction books in general, but I especially love science fiction books where I feel like you almost learn something. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not much of a reader of science fiction or fiction in general. I typically do read nonfiction, if I have to be honest. And there's a main reason why this book and the trilogy itself has won a bajillion awards. There's a clear reason why this is considered one of the best and most famous science fiction trilogies, and that is because a lot of the thoughts, the theories, and the concepts brought up in this book are a perfect combination of actual science fact in the real world, so to speak, blended with the entire story that is crafted throughout the entire trilogy. And I will say, when it comes to this book, this is a bittersweet thing on that note, is that I find the book is a bit dense for a couple different reasons. One is the science aspect. I'm a huge fan of physics. I've been studying quantum physics for years. I still remember reading The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene, kind of like an OG classic in the physics world. In case you don't know, if you've never read it, you definitely should. I feel like it was one of the first, if not the first book that took all the complex science of quantum physics and simplified it or tried to explain it in a way for the average person. It was kind of a groundbreaking book that Brian Greene did such a phenomenal job of how to make quantum physics accessible to everybody. And when it comes to this book, bringing it now to this book, to The Three-Body Problem, I will say that I feel like is a certain amount of at least some knowledge, not a ton, but at least some knowledge of physics in order to understand some of the concepts talked about in this book. I have read other science fiction books. One of my favorite writers, for example, is Michael Crichton, and one of my favorite books by him, and one of my favorite sci-fi books in general, is Prey. Prey is a phenomenal book that's very easy to read, quick, super fast page turner. And in that book, Michael Crichton explains things in very, very extreme detail about artificial intelligence and computers and et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to The Three-Body Problem, I know this might sound weird, but this is the only way I can word it. I felt like this felt like more of like an intermediate science fiction book that is not a very basic, easy to read page turner you can kind of read and not fully pay attention. This is one of those books that you really have to pay attention, really have an understanding of what's going on. There's a lot of kind of complex theories and concepts talked about in this book, and that's something I will say for me that I actually loved. I love the fact that it brought up all of these, like I said, real world or actual physics concepts, or even evolutionary concepts, or different types of science concepts, and then combined it into the story. That being said, it is definitely a dense book. It's about, let me see, like 400-ish pages, but there's a lot of science that's talked about in the book. In addition to the cast or characters, there is a guide in the beginning, and I'm really glad that this is actually in the book. You see like a list of characters right here. So there's 2 pages of this. And I'm not gonna lie, when reading this book, it reminded me a little bit of the first time I watched Game of Thrones, where I was like, wait, like, what's a Baratheon again? What's a Targaryen? Who's Ned Stark again? What's his connection to all these other people or whatever? In this book, there's a lot of people that you kind of have to keep track of. So it's definitely not the type of book that you just read and just casually skim one page after another. It's definitely the type of book that when I read it, I kind of had to be like focused the entire time. But I gotta say, with all that being combined, this was a phenomenal read, and this is definitely one of the best science fiction books I've read in a while. And on that note, it's interesting because I want to say this, that I read online, of course, I was kind of curious about like, okay, well, what about the other books? What's the trilogy like? And in case you didn't know, now kind of touching upon the Netflix TV show, the Netflix TV show is actually not based on the first book per se. The Netflix TV show, as far as I understand it, takes elements of all 3 books. This is pretty common, I feel like, when it comes to taking like a book or a trilogy or whatever and putting it in a visual format. You kind of have to figure out how to make things work visually, not just via text. And to use a comparison, I kind of felt like Silo did that. You know, I mentioned Silo earlier. Phenomenal trilogy, by the way. I've read all 3 books, like I said, and did videos about them. I felt like the TV show, which was awesome, did take some elements of, if anything, I'd say like the first and like 3rd book, not too much of the 2nd book. So it was kind of interesting the way they did that for Silo. But when it comes to 3 Body Problem, they did take elements of all 3 books. And when reading online, it was kind of interesting that on Reddit and other forums or places, some people said, oh, I loved the 3 Body Problem, wasn't the biggest fan of the next 2 books. Other people were the exact opposite. Other people said, you know what? I struggled through the 3 Body Problem, but then once I got to the next 2 books, I absolutely loved them. And I will say, as a side note, I have the Dark Forest right here. This is the 2nd book. So you can see I kind of just started it almost, or this is about 500 pages, so it's a lot longer than 3 Body Problem, and I'm at page 77, so almost a 5th of the way through the book already. I'm already loving the Dark Forest more than the 3 Body Problem. I think for me, the reason why is, like I said, I like science fiction books that bring up a lot of really unique philosophies. And I still remember this. I still remember in 8th grade, kind of random but very relevant, my science teacher said that one of the best predictors of future science and technology are actually comic books. Because 1, of course, they're fiction. They can kind of write them however they want. It's a made-up story. But 2, comic books are visual. So not only are you getting this story, this fictional story or sci-fi story, but you're also getting the visual component along with it. And I feel like in a very similar way when it comes to these books, especially like I said, now getting into the Dark Forest theory, which is the next book, I really like a lot of the thoughts and perspectives that are brought up. And it really does, I think, paint a very, I like to think, accurate picture of what would happen with humanity if we did encounter and heard about an alien civilization. Would some people be for it? Would some people be against it? Would some people almost want death to humanity and want to almost be, taken over by the alien civilization? Would other people want to fight back and say, no, like we want to coexist with them? Or would other people want to hide even and say, you know what, if we hear about an alien civilization, we just should not interact with them at all? And I really do like the fact, like I said earlier, that all these theories that are kind of, in a sense, created in this trilogy are all based in some form of truth, which is why I think this trilogy, especially the 2nd book, The Dark Forest, has even created what's called the Dark Forest theory, which brings up a lot of these logistical implications of interacting with an alien civilization. Curtis Scott, for example, which is a phenomenal YouTube channel, in my opinion, the best like science-based animated YouTube videos, period. They are so good, so well done. They even did an entire video just about the Dark Forest theory. And with that all being said, now I'm bringing it back to the first book, The 3 Body Problem. It really does set the stage, I feel like, for the rest of the trilogy, where you get a good basis and understanding of the characters, what's going on, the crisis at hand, the different perspectives different people have, because of course that definitely is going to evolve over time, and a lot more. Now talking, and I feel like I have to on this video, about the Netflix series. How would I compare them? How would I contrast them? How are they similar? How are they different? Because I may have some potentially unpopular opinions. Now, first off, like I said, as far as I understand it, because I've not read the entire trilogy yet, like I showed you, I'm only about a fifth of the way through the Dark Forest, the Netflix TV show does take elements, as far as I understand it, of the first, second, and third book. And taking a quick side note, I know it's a very famous line to say the book is always better than the movie, or the book is always better than the TV show. For me personally, there are two examples that I felt like the film adaptation was better. One is the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Not just by a little bit, but by a lot. I thought the movie was way better, went way more in depth into the plot, the script, etc., etc. Although I will say, the Narnia books are pretty short. The 7 of them, pretty short, I'll say. The second one, which is definitely controversial, for sure, is The Maze Runner. I actually liked the way the script in the movie played out a lot more than the book itself. I thought that the movie, especially some of the concepts and stuff that happened in the movie, way better than the book. So with that being said, you can probably see where I'm going with this. I gotta be honest, it's tough to say because in some ways, I like the show better. And in some ways, I like the book better. But if I had to pick one, I actually think I might like some of the elements in the show better than the book. And I know I might get some hate for that for a couple different reasons though. One I will say, which I didn't like, might as well start there. The show definitely, I think, oversimplified a lot of the science. The show, of course, was put on Netflix, and as a result of that, they definitely, I think, tried to make it a lot more simple and easier to understand for the average audience. And that is a big complaint I saw online, and understandably so, that a lot of people said, hey, one of the best parts about the book are the actual science topics and theories that are brought up, and the show kind of didn't really talk about them that much, or if they did, they aggressively oversimplified them. And I would say that's definitely the case. So I'll say that, depending on who you are, you might like that or not. But being honest, I think that's the only thing for me I like about the book more than the TV show. I like the fact that the TV show, and again, I'm not going to give anything away if you've not seen the TV show either. I like the camaraderie of the group. I actually like that aspect compared to the book. I felt like didn't have that camaraderie feel. In addition, I thought the whole aspect with the video game, and that's all I'm gonna say, way better, I thought, in the show. I thought that the way they portrayed the video game and how it kind of had that kind of almost what felt like a side plot in the show was a lot better, in my opinion, from a scripting perspective and a writing perspective than the book. And I know I might get some hate for that, but I'm very honest and very transparent. And I think one main difference, which I feel like is my own personal take, I feel like the show, when I watched it, felt more like a thriller. Like you don't know what's going on. There's a lot of unanswered questions. It's a very mysterious type vibe, a very thriller type vibe. The book, I felt like more read like a kind of classic sci-fi novel. Granted, I did see the show first, so I kind of knew what to expect to a degree. In the book, I feel like it didn't really have that mysterious thriller type vibe and energy, if I'd call it that, based off the tonality of the way everything was written. Of course, the show did have to do a few tweaks to make it more visually kind of understandable, right? If you look at the way, for example, in the show, they saw the numbers versus the way it happened in the book, two kind of different instances. Either way, though, I gotta say, I loved both the show and the book. I wanna make it clear, I'm not saying like, oh, the show is way, way better than the book, only watch the show, forget the book, or vice versa. No, I think they go pretty well from my perspective, equally hand in hand. Granted, I've not read the entire trilogy yet, so who knows, maybe I'll finish the trilogy and have a bit more of a different perspective. But overall, I gotta say, if let's say you've not seen the TV show, or you have, either way, The Three-Body Problem is a phenomenal science fiction book that you absolutely have to read.